Good morning, church. My name is Ron Otto. I'm the senior minister here at Lincoln Christian Church. Congratulations to the Illini fans. I think you got this today. You should beat Wisconsin. You should beat Wisconsin. Is that? See, I knew there weren't a lot of fans here. I knew didn't need to do that. It was a few years back, I found myself in traffic court over in Clinton, Illinois. That's right, your preacher has a record. I was in Ohio, I was coming back and got off at Farmer City there, and the ramp goes up, and I kind of looked both ways, and I just did a rolling stop, a really fast rolling stop, and just went through. There was a cop at the bottom of the hill, and if I'd have seen him, I wouldn't have done it. But he saw me and came up and pulled me over, and you rolled through a stop. I said, I did. And registration and stuff. He goes, your registration's expired. It's like 3 months expired. I'm like, what? It was Bonnie's car, but it's my responsibility, so I'm not sure who to blame. And so because of that got me tickets and a court date. Yeah. So I had to go back to Clinton a few months later. I'm sitting in this court, and this judge is just lowering the hammer on everyone in front of him. I'm like maximum fees and fines, and it's just like, and the poor kid in front of me, there was a 16-year-old kid, and he had been driving around the community with all these teenagers in the bed of his truck, and he got pulled over and ticketed. And the judge was like, you understand why you got a ticket? And he's like, no. And he's like, there's a seatbelt law. You know, everyone in your truck has to be in a seatbelt. And this kid got lippy with the judge. He's like, but judge, there's no seatbelts in the bed of a truck. And he goes, that's the point. That's why you don't. And and I'm like, oh my goodness, Lord, please don't call me. And the very next thing, Ronald Otto, oh my goodness. This judge is heated up, and I walked up there and, did you get the registration taken care of? I did. Did you bring proof? Yes. Here's all updated. And he's looking at it, and he says, all right. He said, no fine. No fine? I'd never seen this guy before in my life. And he leaned over the bench, and he said, hey, listen, from now on, let's stop at stop signs. Okay, Pastor? He knew me. I went out of there, I called Bonnie right away on the way home. I'm like, you're not going to believe it. Nothing. I didn't have to pay a dime, nothing. I'm fully pardoned. Woo! I tell you that story because it's true, but I'm not making light of where I need to take us today. We're about to go into some pretty heavy material. Today, Jesus is going to be on trial for his life. The trials of Jesus definitely fall into what I'd call a kangaroo court. If that's a phrase you're not familiar with, kangaroo court is where someone's trying to frame you. They don't have adequate evidence. They've already made up their mind that you're guilty. That's exactly what Jesus went through. The trials of Jesus, they're going to violate your sense of justice. The trials of Jesus are going to violate your conscience of what's fair. He will not receive justice. He will not be treated fairly. And God walks us through this. Why? We're headed to Easter here in a few weeks. When you're reading the Bible and you get to this part, you kind of rush through it because you know you're so close to Easter. You're so close to finishing a gospel and finishing a reading. You blow through this so fast. But God wants us to slow down. God takes us through this. This isn't our story to cut. He wanted you to hear this information. And out of all four Gospels, one of the things they all four repeat is the trials. They all four take us through that. Again, fascinating to me that God would want this repeated not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. There's something here for you and I that's important to God, and it's important in your walk. Christ is in the hands of his enemies now, and they have this ravenous appetite to kill him. It was late Thursday night when he was taken into custody in the Garden of Gethsemane. The end goal, though, was crucifixion all along. The Jews don't have the authority to do that, so they're going to have to use the Romans. The Romans have the power to do it. So Jesus is going to enter into 6 different trials. 3 will be Jewish trials and 3 will be Roman trials. but none of them will obey the laws, and none of them will seek justice. I'm going to move real quick. First trial, after Jesus was arrested, he was taken to the old high priest house, Annas. And Annas was still a man who had a lot of influence in the community. He was still very respected, but he had been taken out as a high priest. There was a new high priest, which happened to be his son-in-law. But now they still seek him out on how they're going to do this. Annas has been conspiring against Jesus for a long time. He questions Jesus. Jesus refuses to answer. So he has Jesus beat severely, and then they transport him in chains over to Caiaphas' house. That will be the second of the trials. The high priest Caiaphas. Caiaphas has also been conspiring against Jesus, and so now Jesus has stood in front of two high priests. There's two high priests in this story. You know what? That's not accurate. I apologize. That's not completely accurate. There's actually three high priests in the story. Annas was the previous high priest, and Caiaphas is the current high priest, but there's also a third high priest there. It is the almighty high priest, Jesus Christ. And in this story, three high priests all come together. Two are conspiring against the one. Here they present false witnesses who contradict each other. Jesus refuses to answer. Caiaphas comes unglued. He goes out on this old Mosaic law that requires an answer. He says, by the code of Moses, you must answer this. Are you the Messiah? Are you the Son of God? And in the Gospel of Mark says he said, I am. Caiaphas will flip out. In Matthew chapter 26, verse 65, then Caiaphas tore his clothes and he said, he has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? You don't need witnesses that can't agree, so why do we need them? Look now, you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? And he is worthy of death, they all answered. Verse 67, then they spit in his face. They struck him with their fist. Others slapped him and said, prophesy, Messiah, who hit you? You didn't get it there, but in another version, we're told there was a hood put over his head, and they would hit him and then joke. Come on, Jesus, prophesy, who hit you? And they did this over and over and over again. Miracle after miracle after miracle gave proof to who Jesus was, but they refused to believe. If you're a skeptic with us today, man, we're glad you're here. We love it when skeptics come here and ask us the hard questions. We love it when skeptics come and they're investigating the story. But this is I've heard it said by a skeptic, well, if God would just prove himself, I'd believe. No, you wouldn't. You've already made up your mind not to believe. There's plenty enough evidence to believe. And even back then, some of these men even witnessed miracles and still refused to believe. So he sent off to a third. The third trial is with the Sanhedrin, and they've also been conspiring against Jesus. By the way, the Jewish Sanhedrin had rules for a capital case. They'll break those rules. Just to give you a small taste of some of the rules. Number one, no trial can happen at night. It has to wait till morning. They break that law. Number two, no trial can happen on the Sabbath or during a festival. It's Passover week. So they break that law. Number three, no trial can be done in private. It must be done in open public. They break that that law. And number four, no high priest should ever interrogate a prisoner. And both the high priests were interrogating Jesus. And so they break that law. This trial is a sham. They do not care about justice. They just want to see Jesus killed. So that's the three Jewish trials. So then they take Jesus to Pilate. Now, this will be the first time he's in front of Pilate, the fourth trial of them all. They come in and they bring all these false accusations against Jesus. That is really troublesome to me. It actually frustrates me to no end. False testimonies they're bringing. These are the high priest. They're responsible to hold people to the law of Moses. These are the Sadducees. They're responsible. The Sanhedrin, they're responsible to hold people to the law of God. The Pharisees are also there. They always pride themselves that they follow the law of God. Inside the 10 Commandments, there is, thou shalt not bring false testimony against another. And here the high priest will do it, and these Jewish leaders will do it, and they're doing it in front of their brothers in this area. Nobody calls them out. That's what hatred will do in a person's heart. When hatred takes such a deep catch of your heart, it will just drive you to do things that are just maddening. And they do this to try to frame Jesus. They say, Jesus said, don't pay your taxes. That's not what Jesus said. Jesus said, render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Pay your taxes. Well, Jesus is stirring up the crowd with misinformation. No, he's not. You're all stirring up the crowd with misinformation. Pilate, in this moment, he learns that Jesus is from Galilee. Hey, that's a region governed by Herod. And guess what? Herod's in town. Herod's in Jerusalem right now for the Passover. Send him to Herod. We go into the 5th trial. Herod's really excited to get to know Jesus. He's been hearing about it. He wants to see signs and wonders. Jesus remains silent. Jesus doesn't speak a word to Herod. He's been up all night. He's been beaten. He's been dragged around, bound. And so Herod at this point says, I'll just beat him some more. So he has him beat some more and sent back to Pilate. Now we're in the 6th and final trial. Pilate, to his tribute, I guess, he tries 3 times to get Jesus off, but he can't. So in verse 1 of John 19, it says, Pilate had Jesus flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe. They went up to him again and again, saying, Hail, King of the Jews. And then they slapped him in the face. Verse 4, once more, Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, Look, I'm bringing him out to you and let you know that I find no fault in him. It's been suggested that when Jesus came out, even his own mother wouldn't have recognized him because of the beating he had been through. He was unrecognizable at that point. And Pilate says, I find no fault in him. I find no fault in him. Well, of course you can't find no fault in him. He's the sinless Son of God. He's the Lamb without blemish. You're not going to find any fault in him. Pardon my anger, but I just find it unthinkable that they would beat Jesus to this level knowing he was an innocent man. They will just make a sport of hitting him, by the way. They pull out his beard with their hands. They pull out the hairs of his beard. They put a hood over him and punch him. They slap him. They spit on him. Over and over and over again. Jesus is then flogged. That's 40 lashes minus 1. The cat of 9 tails, which just strips the meat off your back. You know, if you're a skeptic, how do you answer that this was told that this would happen to the Messiah 600 years before Jesus? 600 years before Jesus, when we were reading passages about the coming Messiah, Isaiah 50 says, I offered my back to those who beat me, my cheeks to those who pulled out my beard. I did not hide my face from mocking and spitting. That was written 600 years before Jesus endured it. How do you explain that? You can't explain it. Not with any level of integrity. You know that there's something going on here. Jesus endured unspeakable suffering. He endured betrayal of Judas, and he endured the disloyalty of Peter. But, oh boy, the big rejection is now about to come. Pilate, in a last moment ditch, he goes into a practice that was done at Passover to release a prisoner to the crowd's request. And so Pilate goes into his dungeon and he finds the worst criminal he has. His name is Barabbas. Barabbas is treason. He's in prison for treason and for murder. What you need to know about Barabbas is that he wanted to overthrow the government and kill everybody there. He wanted to kill the Jews. That's what Barabbas wanted. And Pilate, maybe in his thinking, is, you know what, I'll bring Barabbas out. And when they compare him, someone who wants to destroy them, wants to destroy their society, their lives, compared to Jesus, who is loving and kind and meek and mild, that it will open their eyes, and they'll pick Jesus to stay alive. But the Jewish leaders stir up the crowd. Ask for Barabbas, ask for Barabbas. And they all start chanting and shouting Barabbas' name. We live in a world right now that doesn't want to receive Jesus. They don't want to hear about Jesus. And what they're screaming for is a lifestyle that's brought on by Barabbas. They don't make the connection, but they're screaming for this. I want this. I don't want him. And they don't know the hatred and the destruction that they're bringing down upon themselves. And so in that moment, Pilate washes his hands. He says, I'm clean of this man's blood. This is on you guys. And they say the most unbelievable thing. The Jewish leaders say, his blood is on us and on our children. If there's a curse for what we're doing today, we accept it on us and on our kids. Can you imagine? And Jesus goes off to be crucified, and Barabbas is set free. Barabbas, how did you get free? We love our freedom in America. We love it. Like to be free. That's a pretty heavy run here, so just for a moment, let me tell you something kind of fun. I was in my truck. My grandson was in the seat behind me in his kid's seat. The window was down. I pulled up next to this dump truck. It had a big trailer, and on the back of this big trailer was this one of the largest yellow Caterpillar backhoes I've ever seen in my life. And from the back seat, I heard my grandson say, "Boy, I wish I had a backhoe." And so I was a little curious, and what would a 5-year-old do with a backhoe? I'm like, Ben, if you had a backhoe, what would you do with it? And from behind me, I heard, anything I want. That's freedom, baby. Who would give up their freedom? Well, we live in a world that does it all the time. We're still bound by our sin and shame, and Jesus is willing to free us from that, but we have to accept him. We have to have faith in him. We have to connect ourselves to him. But too many people in this world say, no, I'll pay for my own sins. I don't need you, Jesus, to pay for my sins. I'll pay for my own sins. That's the message of our world. And they're chanting Barabbas, Barabbas, Barabbas instead of chanting Jesus. You're part of a very, very few who chant Jesus. Give us Jesus, we sing. Who would give up their freedom? Barabbas is part of this story, and Jesus is a part of this story, and God wanted you to know that there was this prisoner exchange. All right, brace yourself. We are Barabbas. Oh, we probably didn't commit murder, but we got a long list of sins ourselves, and we get pardoned in this Christian story. And somebody else pays our debt. Not only pays our debt, but he takes my cross, by the way. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not. But that's the first time I've said that. That's just for this audience right here. I have too much fun with you. How was there an extra cross ready for Jesus? That trial came as a surprise to Pilate that morning. He wasn't expecting another capital trial. He did everything he could to get Jesus off. 3 times he said, I find no fault in him. He wasn't planning on sending Jesus to the cross. Why was there an extra? There was an extra cross because it was Barabbas' cross. Barabbas had already been found guilty. Barabbas was already going to be executed. 3 were going to be executed that day, 2 thieves and Barabbas. And when Barabbas was pardoned, Jesus took his cross. Tell me I'm wrong. Jesus took my cross. He takes your cross. And today you get to pick what kind of life you want. You want one following Jesus and becoming more like him, or do you want what Barabbas represents? We don't know what happened to Barabbas, by the way. Did he go back to a life of crime? We don't know. Was he grateful at all to Jesus? Don't know. Was he affected by this prisoner exchange? Nobody knows. But knowing everything that you know right now, does it change you? What Jesus went through? Knowing the suffering and the pain and the torture he went through, does it do anything in your heart? If I were you and I was sitting out there and I hadn't publicly connected my name to Jesus, I would do it pretty quick. So who do you choose? You want a world of Barabbases, or do you want to become like Jesus? It's your choice right now.